What's good to all the broke people out there? Couldn't be talking to myself. I know I couldn't be talking to my own audience either, because we're all rich. We know what we're rich in? Undead Unluck content. We're here to talk about an individual today who has gotten a little bit more notoriety recently, within recent chapters, and it's somebody who we're all thinking about, all really trying to figure out right now, and that is our boy, Nico Vorgeil. I just want to speak about a couple of things we know about Nico today, along with a couple theories, or at least one, which I have regarding him and his ability, which could be what I'm thinking, but remember, without further ado. So in terms of information we know about Nico, we do know that he's a Negator, obviously, given the fact that he's an individual who sits at the round table. You know, you gotta be a Negator to be a part of that group who initiates the whole quest process and everything, so we do know he's a Negator. A very interesting thing we also know about Nico is that he's a relatively old individual, and although he does look pretty young, aside from, the bags under his eyes and shit, he is pretty old. He was one of the individuals who was part of that task force who went and captured Victor back in the day, whenever old Andy, whoever the hell, can't even think right now, but he was one of the individuals who captured Andy, and he was even told about how he was part of that group who, messed with Andy and tested on his body, and that's how he knew how to, use the laser beam balls to attack him and slow down his regeneration a bit. So that's a very interesting part of him, just given the fact that he does look very young, and it's not like he has an ability like Unchanged, Gina, how she was able to keep her whole skin and everything from sagging, really, just because, she could put a whole coating on herself of unchanging air. And it's not like Jules, who presumably has some sort of thing with the arc, but I think, honestly, her aging kind of may tie into Nico and his abilities as well. But another thing that we do know about Nico is that he's a very strong individual. So whenever Shin is discussing the parameters regarding his ability, he's talking about how individuals with different strength levels vary in terms of the efficiency or the efficacy of Untruth. So he has a tier list, and it goes from a Fuko to an Andy. And whenever he's talking about individuals like Fuko, he basically can use Untruth to the highest of its degree. It tells him basically everything she's going to do, and he really can see through everything that's going to occur in that fight. But an individual such as Andy, or we saw even with, my guy, Think, it's a lot harder for Untruth to stop what's going to happen with the abilities and to slow down that fighting, because if you're fighting at such a high skilled level and you're not using your brain too much to think about it, like that's just ingrained in you, you kind of see through the bullshit of Untruth. But interestingly enough, within that same tier list, Andy and Jules were alongside one other individual, Nico. And I know that Nico's been alive a long time, so he does presumably have a lot of combat experience, but I don't think that just inherently means you're big body hard-boiled like that. Another thing to kind of piggyback that and, bolster that fact is that he was one of the only individuals we've seen so far go on and solely take down an Uma on his own. He was the individual who captured Uma language. Well, I guess, took it out. I don't even remember. Sorry. My head's the weekend, y'all. It's Memorial Day weekend. We'll get lit. but yeah, like I was saying, he was the individual who solely, on his own, took down an Uma. And we haven't seen too much of that happen before, so that's a feat that's you gotta tout. It's a highly touted feat, and you have to put some respect on my nigga Nico's name just through that sort of feat on its own. So we know he's a very strong individual. We know he's a rather old individual, so we can infer that he's very, experienced. He's been through combat a lot of times, but then we start to get to the weird parts of Nico. And one of the weird parts of him, I think, is the group of scientists, or I would just call them the thinker-ass niggas, that he interacts with. Many of those individuals look just like Nico, and one of them, Miko, the little girl, literally calls him Pappy in one of the earlier chapters. I had a lot of questions as to why she did this, but I guess it could come down to really two reasons. Presumably one, That's his daughter. We did see the woman who he was in love with, presumably in love with, but obviously just meant a lot to him. That could presumably be their daughter together, and he had a kid with her because he's been alive for a long time. But I think the second one is more interesting, and that being that she's a clone, just like the other individuals who look just like Nico. There's at least one more, could be more. I could look harder. Sorry, I only read so much. I'm only on my third read through. Like my third day out here. Like, bear with me. But they look just like Nico. They interact with him very easily, and they just do his bidding with a smile on their face type shit. And just the fact that there's so much in likeness to him is very odd to me, especially given the fact that Nico is a scientist who's created technologies which far exceed the technological landscape of the world around him. The world's still relatively normal outside of the Negators and the Umas and all that sort of shit. But technology-wise, it seems like a world very similar to ours, I guess to say. But the Union has some insane technologies. And most of them are due to the scientists, the lead one, Nico Vorgeil. And it makes me think, what is his ability? How is he able to presumably create clones? How is he able to create all these insane technologies which are used throughout the Union and that are just, almost unfathomable? Unfathomable. That's my thought. I think that Nico Vorgeil might be unfathomable. An individual who can create things which are, unfathomable. Able to do things, do scenarios and, create actions which are unfathomable. It's hard to even think of how he could get these things done. It's how he could create a clone that completely isn't his likeness. That's how he could create all these insane technologies. That's how he can create, these hoverballs, these things which presumably, even with all the insane technologies the world has, we still are, running under finite resources and materials and shit. And if I know it's not like you can put real world science into an anime or a manga, but it seems like his technologies are just unfathomable. They don't make sense to be in that world. And even the fact that this dude is just always on some nut shit. He looks very healthy, even though he's an old man. It makes me think that he has some sort of ability which allows him to create technologies and create actions, do whatever the heck he wants to do, that allows him to just have unfathomable things around him. That's how he can create technologies which allow him to, go solo, take down Umas, which allow all the things which are within the Union to, be built and, have all that shit around there. I don't know. Think on it, nigga. Think on it. But another very interesting theory that I've seen a lot, and it kind of stems from the whole naming of Negators, is him being unforgettable. An individual who maybe, through his ability, can never forget what's in his mind. And that's why, whenever you saw him and there's a flashback on, the negative feedback or the negative emotions which are evoked by being a Negator, just being handed this card in life. Nico is sitting there in his bed, just going crazy, and he's got pills next to him. And it makes you think, is Nico presumably going crazy because he's got brain overload type shit? Is he just sitting in this way, and it's inside of his brain where he never forgets information? He knows what occurred during the last loop. He knows what occurs during this loop, or at least he remembers everything that's going to occur during this loop because everything's unforgettable to him. Maybe he doesn't see the future, but maybe he has all the memories of the past inside of his head, which would also, kind of make sense in terms of him being able to create those technologies after you work on this shit, loop after loop after loop after loop. Probably gets to be second nature to you, which would make a lot of sense if you can't forget any of that shit. But I think those are two very interesting theories, but I just still don't know really what the truth behind Nico is. And shout out my nigga Unrepair. You be on every video. You give me the motivation to do a lot of this shit. You a real one. But he mentioned something during the latest chapters, which was very interesting to me whenever I went and looked back. So Nico Although he did betray the Union, I don't know if he's the individual who actually defeated Shin and Mui. So during the fight at Summer, whenever Fang pops up, Shin hits him with the 5 points of whatever type shit. And whenever Shin's on the ground during that same sequence after Nico betrays the Union, there are 5 points on his body that are seemingly marked, like he was punched or hit there. So presumably, whenever Nico let down the defenses at the Union, he just left. And Fang just was freed due to him, actually being captured after the Summer arc. And after that, Fang got out and said, "Come on, boys, it's time to scrap now. I'm the strongest creation again." Beat my nigga Shin's ass, obviously. Beat Mui's ass, obviously. And that would honestly make a little bit of sense. And then it also leaves headway because I don't think Nico was actually fully betraying the Union whenever he did what he did. I think Uma Ghost might be a bigger key to this shit than we think he is. I think whenever Uma Ghost eats the soul, the ghost of individuals, that might fully take you out of each loop. That might make it so you're not going to, go on to the next loop, which would mean that whenever he had the soul of this woman, she could presumably still be saved in terms of, Nico being able to, know he's going to see her again in the next loop. But if Uma Ghost told him, you have to let down the defenses, you have to free the Umas, presumably because God took over him and wanted Ragnarok to occur quicker, it would make a lot of sense for this nigga Nico to just abide by what he's asking for and then dip from the Union, especially because right afterwards, Uma Ghost presumably dipped with the woman who he just kind of like held as a counterweight, a piece of leverage in a deal. I'm sorry I can't talk, but that would make sense. That would make sense just for Nico to only betray them just because he doesn't want this woman to get completely erased from reality, and that Uma Ghost was just kind of being a puppet to God, and that dog, there's a lot of shit that we don't know with Nico Vorgeil, but we need to figure out soon. And I think a lot of this is gonna lead up to something that I need to talk about in another video, and it's the theory that Jules will not be in the next loop. But shit, I'll see y'all soon.